What if the secrets of the universe were hidden just beyond your reach? What if a single book held the power to reveal forbidden truths and unlock the mysteries of what happens when we die? This audiobook isn't just a collection of stories. It's a transformative journey into the realms of the unknown, where curiosity meets courage, and every page pulls you closer to uncovering the extraordinary truths of existence. Chapter 1. Discovery of the Forbidden Text. It was an ordinary afternoon in the heart of the city, where the hum of life buzzed through streets lined with cafes and boutique shops. Amidst the bustle, a forgotten alley led to a place few noticed. A small, weathered bookstore with no nameplate. Its facade was a mosaic of cracked paint and ivy tendrils, and its only distinguishing feature was a tarnished brass bell that chimed faintly when the door creaked open. Miriam had not planned to visit the bookstore that day. She was on her way to meet a friend when a sudden downpour forced her to seek shelter. The shop seemed to call to her as she stepped inside, shaking the rain from her coat. The air smelled of aged parchment and cedarwood, and every corner was shadowed by shelves that seemed to stretch endlessly. The atmosphere felt timeless, as though she had crossed a threshold into another era. The shopkeeper, an elderly man with a neatly trimmed beard and piercing blue eyes, glanced up from behind the counter. He offered a polite nod but said nothing, returning to the pages of a thick book that appeared older than the store itself. Miriam wandered the aisles aimlessly, her fingers brushing against spines with faded titles. In a dim corner of the shop, her gaze fell upon a peculiar book. Unlike the others, this one lacked a title. Its leather-bound cover was adorned only with an intricate symbol, a circle containing interwoven geometric patterns. The symbol seemed almost alive, glinting faintly in the low light. Compelled by curiosity, Miriam picked it up. The book was heavier than she expected, its pages dense and slightly yellowed with age. An unusual choice, the shopkeeper's voice broke the silence. He had appeared behind her without a sound, his presence as unassuming as a shadow. That one is not for the faint of heart. Miriam raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? The shopkeeper hesitated, his expression unreadable. That text has a history. Some say it reveals truths best left undiscovered. Intrigued rather than deterred, Miriam carried the book to the counter. I'll take it, she said, her tone firm. The shopkeeper hesitated before wrapping the book in brown paper. Read with caution, he said as she left. It's not merely a book. It's a mirror. Back in her apartment, Miriam unwrapped the book, her heart racing with anticipation. She placed it on her desk and turned on the desk lamp, its golden glow illuminating the strange symbol on the cover. Taking a deep breath, she opened the book to its first page. The text began with a foreword written in elegant, flowing script. To the seeker of truths beyond the veil, know that this tome holds knowledge gathered across centuries, pieced together from whispers of the departed and glimpses into realms unseen. Its purpose is neither to comfort nor to frighten, but to reveal. Proceed only if you are prepared to face what lies beyond the final breath. Miriam's skepticism wavered. The words felt alive, resonating with a weight that made her question whether she had stumbled upon something truly extraordinary. The first chapter detailed the book's origins. It spoke of a council of scholars, mystics, and shamans who had gathered in secrecy during the 5th century to compile accounts of near-death experiences, spiritual revelations, and messages from the other side. Over time, the manuscript had been hidden, lost, and rediscovered, each time surfacing with new additions from those who claimed to have glimpsed what lies beyond death. As Miriam read on, the tone shifted. The text began recounting the story of an unnamed monk who had lived during the 12th century. He had experienced what he called a temporary death during a fever that left him unconscious for days. Upon his recovery, he described traversing a tunnel of light that opened into a realm of overwhelming peace. But his journey did not end there. He spoke of choices presented to him by entities he described as beings of radiant wisdom. They showed him his life in vivid detail, highlighting the moments of love and the scars of regret. He was given a choice, to remain in this realm or return to his earthly life to fulfill unresolved purposes. The monk's account ended with his plea to others. Live with love and intention, for all is seen and felt beyond the veil. Miriam's breath caught as she read the monk's words. It felt as though he was speaking directly to her, imploring her to examine her own life. Hours passed as Miriam continued to immerse herself in the book. The stories grew more diverse yet eerily consistent. A 16th-century merchant recounted encountering a vast field of light where he reunited with loved ones. A 19th-century mystic described a labyrinthine void where lost souls wandered, searching for closure. Each narrative added a layer to the tapestry of what might await beyond death. Miriam's logical mind struggled to reconcile the accounts with her understanding of reality. Could this be real? Or was it merely a collection of allegories? She felt an inexplicable pull to uncover the truth. Determined to learn more, she began researching the symbol on the book's cover. Her search led her to obscure academic journals, forgotten folklore, and forums dedicated to esoteric studies. Patterns emerged. The symbol was linked to ancient rites, often appearing in artifacts associated with death rituals. Some sources suggested it represented the cyclical nature of life and death, while others claimed it was a key to unlocking hidden dimensions. As the weeks went by, Miriam's life became consumed by the book and its mysteries. She reached out to historians and spiritual scholars, hoping for insights. Most dismissed her inquiries, but one name kept surfacing: Dr. Elias Carter, a reclusive historian known for his work on forbidden texts and lost knowledge. After numerous attempts, Miriam managed to secure a meeting with Dr. Carter. His home was a labyrinth of books and artifacts, each telling a story of its own. The moment she showed him the book, his demeanor changed. He examined it with reverence, his fingers tracing the symbol on its cover. "Where did you find this?" he asked, his voice tinged with awe. Miriam recounted her encounter in the bookstore. Dr. Carter nodded thoughtfully. "This is no ordinary artifact," he said. "It's said to contain knowledge that transcends time. But be warned, the deeper you delve, the more it reveals about you." "What does that mean?" Miriam pressed. Dr. Carter hesitated. "The book is a mirror," he said. "It reflects not only the mysteries of the afterlife but the truths you carry within yourself. It will challenge your perceptions, your beliefs, and your fears." As Miriam returned home, his words echoed in her mind. She reopened the book, feeling both apprehensive and exhilarated. She was no longer reading out of curiosity. She was searching for answers, for understanding, and perhaps for redemption. Little did she know, the journey she had begun would not only uncover the secrets of what happens when we die but would also unravel the very fabric of her existence. Before the next chapter, I'd like to know where you all are listening from. Comment below where you are and what time it currently is. Also, if you are enjoying, please consider liking the video and subscribing to support us creating these audiobooks. Chapter 2. The Hidden History of the Manuscript. The book sat on Miriam's desk like an enigma, its ornate cover glinting under the soft glow of a desk lamp. She had barely scratched the surface of its contents, but already it had begun to consume her thoughts. Who had created this mysterious manuscript? Why did its stories align so eerily with accounts from vastly different cultures and times? Questions buzzed in her mind like an unrelenting swarm. Determined to unravel the book's origins, Miriam began her research by revisiting the cryptic foreword. Know that this tome holds knowledge gathered across centuries, pieced together from whispers of the departed and glimpses into realms unseen. The idea that the book was a compilation of wisdom from multiple sources intrigued her. If true, its creation must have spanned generations, possibly millennia. With her journalist instincts kicking in, she knew she had to dig deeper. The first clue came from the symbol embossed on the cover. After hours of scouring academic articles and online forums, Miriam discovered its origin, an ancient glyph associated with the Egyptian priesthood of Thoth. In mythology, Thoth was the god of wisdom, writing, and the afterlife. Artifacts bearing the symbol had been found in burial chambers, where they were believed to act as guides for souls journeying to the next realm. But the symbol wasn't confined to Egypt. Similar patterns appeared in artifacts from Sumerian ziggurats, Indian temples, and even Celtic burial sites. It seemed to transcend geographical and cultural boundaries, as though it was a universal emblem of humanity's quest to understand death and what lay beyond. Miriam's investigation led her to a dusty corner of the university library, where she uncovered an obscure text titled The Codices of the Veil. Its author, an eccentric 19th-century historian named Algernon Wexley, claimed to have traced the lineage of several esoteric manuscripts. According to Wexley, the book in Miriam's possession matched descriptions of a legendary text known as the Guide Beyond. He wrote, Throughout history, whispers of this manuscript have emerged like shadows, only to vanish again into obscurity. Some say it was first compiled by the Council of Nine, a secretive assembly of mystics, philosophers, and scribes who sought to decode the mysteries of existence. The Council of Nine, as described by Wexley, was said to have convened in the 5th century. Its members hailed from different corners of the ancient world, each bringing unique insights and spiritual teachings. There was Serapis, an Egyptian high priest, Ashvini, a Vedic scholar from India, and Eudoxus, a Greek philosopher who had studied under the remnants of Pythagorean schools. According to legend, the council's purpose was to consolidate humanity's fragmented understanding of life and death into a single manuscript. They believed that by doing so, they could provide a map for the soul's journey and, perhaps, unlock the secrets of the universe itself. Each member contributed stories and knowledge gathered from their respective traditions. Serapis detailed the Egyptian rites of passage, including the weighing of the heart against the feather of Marat. Ashvini offered insights from the Upanishads, describing the eternal cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. Eudoxus added philosophical musings on the nature of the soul and its relationship to the cosmos. The manuscript they created was not static. Over centuries, it traveled through time and space, finding its way into the hands of those deemed worthy or curious enough to seek its truths. Each custodian added their own experiences and revelations, transforming the text into a living document. Miriam's research revealed that the book's survival was no accident. It had been guarded by a series of secretive groups who believed in its sanctity. The first known guardians were the Scriptorium of Lux, a monastic order in the medieval period. The Scriptorium was dedicated to preserving forbidden knowledge and shielding it from those who might misuse it. Later, during the Enlightenment, the book resurfaced in the hands of an alchemical society known as the Brotherhood of the Veil. They believed the manuscript held the key to transcending mortality and sought to decode its mysteries using both science and mysticism. Yet, despite their efforts, the book often vanished, as though it had a will of its own. Some claimed it chose its keepers, appearing only to those ready to bear its truths. Miriam's investigation wasn't without peril. The deeper she delved, the more she encountered warnings. One historian she contacted, an aging professor with a reputation for eccentricity, refused to speak about the manuscript over the phone. When they finally met, his first words were, "That book doesn't just reveal truths. It demands something in return." He explained that many who had studied the manuscript became obsessed, unable to separate themselves from its mysteries. Some reported vivid dreams of otherworldly realms. Others claimed to hear whispers emanating from the pages. A few had even vanished without a trace. Miriam dismissed the warnings as superstition. But as she continued her research, she began experiencing peculiar phenomena. The book seemed to grow heavier each time she opened it. Words she swore weren't there before would appear on its pages. And in the quiet hours of the night, she sometimes thought she heard faint whispers, though she couldn't discern their source. Despite the growing unease, Miriam couldn't stop. She felt as though the book had chosen her, pulling her into a story that spanned centuries. Yet, one question haunted her. Why now? Why had this manuscript, with its wealth of forbidden knowledge, surfaced at this particular moment in her life? As she pondered this, she noticed something she hadn't before, a faint inscription on the inside cover. It was written in Latin, and though her translation skills were rudimentary, she managed to piece together its meaning. The seeker and the sought are one. To understand the beyond, first understand yourself. The message struck her like a bolt of lightning. The book wasn't just a record of what happens when we die. It was a mirror, reflecting her deepest fears, hopes, and questions. And if she wanted answers, she would have to confront them all. As Miriam closed the book for the night, she knew her journey was only beginning. The next step would take her deeper into the manuscript's stories, where the boundaries between life and death blurred, and where the truth she sought could change her forever. Chapter 3. The First Journey Beyond Death. The hours Miriam spent poring over the book began to blur into days. Sleep came sparingly, her mind too engrossed in the labyrinthine stories within its pages. Each new account felt like a key unlocking a door to a realm she could hardly comprehend. But one story stood out, gripping her attention with a force that made the others seem like faint echoes. It was the tale of a monk, unnamed but vividly remembered, who had experienced death and returned to tell of what lay beyond. The monk's account was written in a style that was both poetic and raw, as though every word was etched into the manuscript with the weight of his emotions. He spoke of a fever that had overtaken him during a harsh winter in the 12th century. For days, he had drifted in and out of consciousness, until finally, his body gave way. What he described next sent chills down Miriam's spine. He awoke, not in his bed, but in a tunnel bath in a light so pure it seemed to hum with a life of its own. The walls of the tunnel pulsed, not with sound, but with an energy that vibrated through his very being. He felt neither fear nor pain, only an overwhelming sense of peace. As he moved, or rather, was carried, through the tunnel, he became aware of shapes around him. Beings of light, their forms indistinct but their presence undeniable, flanked him on either side. Though they did not speak, he understood their thoughts as if they were his own. They were guides, shepherding him to a destination he could not yet see. The monk's journey continued until the tunnel opened into a vast expanse of light. Here, time and space seemed to lose their meaning. He described it as a realm where everything was connected, where the boundaries between himself and the universe dissolved. He could feel the pulse of existence, each beat resonating with love, purpose, and an indescribable harmony. Yet, this was not the end of his journey. The beings of light led him to what he called the chamber of reflection. It was not a place, but a state of being, where he was made to confront the entirety of his life. Every action, every word, every thought was laid bare, not as a judgment, but as a revelation. He saw the ripples of his choices, how a kind word had lifted another's spirit, how a moment of anger had sown pain. The monk's words conveyed the profound weight of this experience. To see one's life as it truly is, stripped of illusion, is to witness the soul in its purest form. The beings of light did not judge him. Instead, they emanated a compassion so profound it brought him to tears. They showed him the moments where he had lived in alignment with his purpose and the times he had strayed. Through this process, he came to understand that his life was part of a greater tapestry, each thread interwoven with countless others. This realization filled him with a sense of peace and responsibility. But the monk's journey did not end there. He was given a choice. He could remain in this realm of light, where he would continue to grow and evolve, or he could return to his earthly life to fulfill purposes yet undone. The decision weighed heavily on him. To stay was to embrace peace, but to return was to face the trials of life once more. In the end, it was the thought of those he had left behind that guided his choice. With a heart full of love and resolve, he chose to return. When he awoke in his bed, the fever broken and his strength returning, he carried with him the memory of his journey. It changed him irrevocably. The monk dedicated the remainder of his life to spreading the message he had received. Live with love and intention, for all is seen and felt beyond the veil. Miriam read the monk's account 3 times over, each pass deepening her connection to his words. She felt as though he was speaking directly to her, urging her to reflect on her own life. Had she lived with intention? Had her choices aligned with the person she wanted to be? The story left Miriam in a contemplative haze, but the book did not let her linger for long. The next narrative pulled her in like a tide, offering a new perspective on the afterlife. This time, it was the account of a 16th-century merchant who had drowned at sea. His experience mirrored the monk's in some ways, the tunnel of light, the overwhelming peace, but diverged in others. The merchant described a realm of colors so vivid they defied description, where he encountered loved ones who had passed before him. They greeted him not with words, but with an embrace that spoke of eternal bonds. Unlike the monk, the merchant's journey did not include a life review. Instead, he was shown glimpses of future possibilities, paths his soul might take should he choose to reincarnate. He described it as standing at the edge of a vast web, each thread leading to a different life, each choice branching into infinite outcomes. The decision, he realized, was his alone. Miriam couldn't help but marvel at the consistency of the themes within the stories. Though the details varied, the core elements, light, love, connection, and choice, remained constant. It was as though the afterlife was not a singular experience but a multifaceted journey shaped by the soul's unique essence. As she closed the book that night, Miriam felt a shift within herself. The accounts she had read were more than stories. They were invitations to look beyond the surface of existence, to consider the impact of her thoughts, actions, and beliefs. For the first time, she began to see her life as part of a greater whole, a thread in the intricate tapestry of existence. Sleep came to her easily that night, her dreams filled with images of light and the gentle hum of an otherworldly melody. When she awoke, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. The book had only begun to unveil its secrets, and Miriam was determined to uncover them all, no matter where the journey led. Chapter 4. The Reckoning of Souls. Miriam's fingers trembled as she turned the page, the weight of the previous accounts still pressing heavily on her mind. She had anticipated stories of ethereal beauty and light, but what she read next plunged her into the darker, more complex aspects of the afterlife. This chapter was not about the peace that awaited beyond the veil. It was about the reckoning that every soul must face. The first account was that of a Roman general, a man who had lived his life wielding power and fear. He had entered the afterlife burdened by the cries of those he had harmed. His journey began in the same tunnel of light described by others, but his destination was vastly different. Instead of emerging into a realm of peace, he found himself in a vast, desolate plain shrouded in mist. There, he encountered shadows, not malevolent entities, but echoes of his own deeds. Each shadow represented a moment of his life where he had caused pain or taken without remorse. The general described the experience as both harrowing and enlightening. The shadows did not accuse or condemn him. They simply reflected his actions. For the first time, he was forced to confront the full weight of his choices. To see one's life through the eyes of others is to understand the depths of our impact, he wrote. The process was not punishment but revelation, a necessary step toward understanding and growth. Miriam was struck by the profound fairness of the process. The reckoning was not about judgment from an external force but about self-awareness and accountability. The text explained that every soul must undergo this stage, though the experience varied greatly depending on the life lived. For some, it was a gentle reminder of the love they had shared. For others, it was a confrontation with the harm they had caused. The chapter continued with a series of similar stories, each illustrating the universal nature of this reckoning. A medieval healer described how she was shown the moments where her kindness had brought solace to others, but also the times when fear had led her to turn away from those in need. An 18th-century merchant recounted seeing the ripple effects of his greed, not only on his family but on the countless lives indirectly affected by his actions. As Miriam read, she began to reflect on her own life. What shadows would she face in the reckoning? Were there moments she had ignored or forgotten that had left scars on others? The thought was both sobering and motivating. She realized that the reckoning was not meant to instill fear but to inspire change. It was a chance to live with greater intention and awareness. The final story in the chapter was perhaps the most striking. It was written by a modern individual, a scientist who had experienced a near-death event during a medical procedure. The scientist's description of the reckoning was infused with vivid imagery and raw emotion. He spoke of a river of memories that flowed before him, each drop containing a moment of his life. As he waded through the river, he felt the joy and pain he had caused others as if they were his own. "The river does not lie," he wrote. "It shows us who we are, stripped of pretense and illusion." Miriam closed the book, her mind racing with thoughts of what she had just read. The reckoning of souls was not an end but a beginning, a gateway to transformation and growth. It was a process that allowed each soul to understand its place in the grand tapestry of existence. The idea filled her with a sense of awe and responsibility. She realized that the choices she made each day were not just fleeting moments but threads that wove into the fabric of eternity. As the night deepened, Miriam sat in silence, contemplating her own threads. The book had become more than a source of stories. It was a mirror reflecting her own journey. And with each page she turned, the reflection grew clearer. Chapter 5. The Realms of Light and Shadow. The transition between the accounts and the manuscript was seamless, as though the book itself was guiding Miriam on a journey. Each page seemed imbued with a deliberate intent, leading her deeper into the mysteries of existence. This chapter, titled The Realms of Light and Shadow, unfolded like an intricate map, detailing the destinations that awaited souls after their reckoning. The narrative began with a vivid depiction of a realm known as the Eternal Garden. The text described it as a place of indescribable beauty, where light danced like living beings, weaving through fields of color that defied earthly perception. Souls in this realm existed in perfect harmony, their energy resonating with the vibrations of love and peace. The Eternal Garden was not a place of rest in the traditional sense, but one of reflection and preparation. Here, souls could process their life experiences and prepare for their next journey, whether it was to ascend to higher realms or to return to physical existence. One account, written by a 17th-century artist, described the garden as a living canvas. He wrote of trees that shimmered with hues he had never seen in life, their leaves singing in harmonies that transcended sound. The air was filled with a gentle warmth, not from a sun, but from the collective energy of the souls present. It was as though the very essence of creation was laid bare before me, he wrote. A place where beauty and truth intertwined, offering a glimpse of the divine. In stark contrast was a realm of shadow, a place Miriam found both unsettling and captivating. The text made it clear that this was not a realm of punishment but one of introspection. Souls burdened by regret, anger, or unresolved pain found themselves here, surrounded by a dim and heavy silence. The atmosphere was not oppressive but reflective, a space designed for healing rather than torment. The chapter recounted the story of a healer from the medieval period who had lived with the guilt of failing to save a loved one. In the shadow realm, she encountered the echoes of her pain, not as accusations but as truths to be acknowledged. Over time, she found solace in the process of confronting her emotions. The shadow is not the enemy, the text read. It is a teacher, revealing the wounds that must be healed. Miriam was struck by the dynamic nature of these realms. They were not static places but fluid spaces that adapted to the needs of each soul. The text emphasized that no realm was permanent. Every soul had the potential to move between them as they grew and evolved. This idea resonated deeply with Miriam. It suggested that the afterlife was not a final destination but a continuation of the soul's journey. As she read on, the descriptions grew more intricate. There were accounts of a realm of light beyond the garden, where souls who had achieved profound enlightenment dwelled. These souls radiated an energy so pure it could not be described in human terms. The text likened them to stars, each contributing to the illumination of the cosmos. Conversely, there were deeper shadow realms where souls struggled with the weight of lifetimes of pain. These realms were not devoid of hope but required immense effort to transcend. One story spoke of a warrior who had lived a life of violence and found himself in a shadow realm filled with the echoes of his actions. Through guidance and self-reflection, he began to understand the roots of his anger and fear, eventually finding a path toward forgiveness and peace. The chapter included vivid accounts from souls who had experienced both realms. A philosopher from ancient Greece described the overwhelming sense of connection he felt in the Eternal Garden, where every being seemed to be a part of a greater whole. He wrote of a luminous thread that linked every soul, a reminder that existence was a tapestry woven from countless lives and experiences. Another recounted the transformative power of the shadow realm, where she had faced her deepest fears and emerged stronger. Miriam couldn't help but marvel at the consistency of these narratives. Despite the differences in culture and era, the core themes remained unchanged: light and shadow, growth and healing, connection and individuality. The realms were not separate entities but complementary aspects of a greater whole. The text concluded with a profound statement. The realms of light and shadow are reflections of the soul's inner landscape. To navigate them is to navigate oneself. Miriam felt a sense of awe as she absorbed these words. The book seemed to be urging her to consider the realms she was creating in her own life. Were her choices leading her toward light or shadow? Were there aspects of herself she had yet to confront? As Miriam closed the book for the night, her mind brimming with new insights, she felt a growing sense of responsibility. The realms of light and shadow were not just places in the afterlife. They were reminders of the power she held to shape her own existence. Each choice she made, each moment she embraced or avoided, was a thread in the tapestry of her soul. Sleep did not come easily that night. Miriam lay awake, her thoughts swirling with images of light-filled gardens and silent shadow realms. The journey was far from over. The book still held countless secrets, each page a doorway to deeper understanding. But for now, she resolved to carry the lessons of this chapter with her, to embrace both the light and the shadow, to seek balance and growth, and to remember that the journey of the soul was one of infinite possibility. Chapter 6: Guardians and Guides. Miriam was starting to sense that the book was more than a collection of narratives. It was a roadmap to understanding the afterlife's intricacies. As she turned the page to the next chapter, she felt an almost electric anticipation. The title at the top read, Guardians and Guides. The text began with a vivid description of the beings that assist souls on their journey beyond life. These guardians and guides were not mere figures of folklore or imagination, but deeply intricate entities whose sole purpose was to support and direct. The narrative wove together stories from different centuries and cultures, all recounting encounters with these otherworldly helpers. One story spoke of a young woman in 14th century India who had slipped into a coma during a severe illness. She described her guide as a figure cloaked in shimmering gold, who extended a hand and led her through realms she couldn't begin to describe. This guide didn't speak but communicated through waves of emotion, infusing her with courage and clarity. When she awoke, her description matched depictions of guides found in ancient texts, including those in her own family's traditions. Another account came from a sailor in 18th century Spain who had been lost at sea. Drifting between life and death, he claimed to have encountered a guardian who appeared as a towering figure wreathed in mist. The guardian's voice was said to resonate like the crash of waves, urging him to reflect on the choices that had brought him to the brink. This interaction, he claimed, gave him the resolve to fight for survival until he was miraculously rescued. The chapter explained that guides often appeared in forms familiar or comforting to the souls they assisted. They could manifest as loved ones, animals, or even abstract lights and energies, adapting to what the soul needed in moments of transition. Miriam read on, captivated by the descriptions of the dual roles these beings played. Guardians protected souls from malevolent forces that might seek to lead them astray during vulnerable transitions. Guides, on the other hand, were gentle instructors, helping souls interpret their experiences and make decisions about their paths forward. The most intriguing part of the chapter described how guides were not external beings for some individuals but extensions of their higher selves. This idea was woven into a story of a monk in Tibet who described his guide as an exact mirror of himself, albeit radiating wisdom and serenity far beyond his own comprehension. The monk's guide revealed that the answers he sought were already within him, waiting to be uncovered. As Miriam absorbed these accounts, she began to wonder about her own life. If guides were extensions of higher selves or beings attuned to the soul, had she ever encountered one? Her thoughts turned to moments of inexplicable intuition or comfort during times of despair. Could those have been subtle touches of guidance from something beyond? The chapter ended with a poignant reminder. Every soul, no matter how lost or uncertain, is never truly alone. Guardians and guides are the eternal companions of our journeys, appearing precisely when we need them most. Miriam closed the book, her mind filled with the comforting notion that there were forces in the universe working tirelessly to help every soul navigate the complexities of life and beyond. She felt a spark of gratitude, not just for the book but for the unseen hands that might have shaped her own path. Chapter 7: The Weight of Regret. The stories in the book had a way of pulling Miriam deeper into her own reflections, and as she began the next chapter, she felt a somber weight settle over her. This chapter, titled The Weight of Regret, explored the burdens carried by souls who entered the afterlife with unresolved emotions and unfinished business. It was a stark contrast to the light-filled realm she had read about earlier, but it was no less important. The opening account belonged to a widowed farmer from the early 19th century. His story was simple but profoundly moving. He described his transition to the afterlife as being met not by light or guides but by the echoes of his own regrets. Chief among them was the guilt he bore for words left unsaid to his late wife. In this ethereal space, he saw flashes of moments when he could have expressed his love but chose silence instead. These missed opportunities replayed endlessly, demanding acknowledgement. As Miriam read, she began to understand that regret in the afterlife was not about punishment but about resolution. The farmer's story didn't end in despair. Guided by an unseen force, he found himself in a space of reflection where he could confront these emotions. The process was painful but ultimately healing. He was given a chance to release the weight of his regrets, not by changing the past but by accepting it and forgiving himself. The chapter unfolded with more stories, each highlighting different kinds of regret. There was the tale of a merchant who had spent his life chasing wealth at the expense of meaningful relationships. In the afterlife, he was confronted by visions of the family he had neglected, their faces etched with disappointment. Yet, as with the farmer, he was shown a path to redemption. The text described his journey as one of rebuilding bridges, not on earth but within the soul. A particularly haunting account was that of a soldier who had fought in a war centuries ago. His regret stemmed from acts of violence he committed in the name of duty. In the afterlife, he faced not only the faces of those he had harmed but also their pain, which he felt as if it were his own. It was an unbearable experience. Yet it was through this process that he began to understand the ripple effects of his actions. The soldier's story ended with him choosing to dedicate his soul's journey to helping others find peace, a form of penance that brought him solace. Miriam was struck by the raw humanity of these accounts. They painted a picture of the afterlife not as a place of judgment but as a space of profound self-realization. Regret was not an eternal sentence but a call to action, a chance to grow and evolve. The most striking narrative came from a modern individual, a scientist who had experienced a near-death event during a medical procedure. The scientist described his reckoning as a river of memories that flowed before him, each drop containing a moment of his life. As he waded through the river, he felt the joy and pain he had caused others as if they were his own. "The river does not lie," he wrote. "It shows us who we are, stripped of pretense and illusion." Miriam closed the book, her mind racing with thoughts of what she had just read. The weight of regret was not an end but a beginning, a gateway to transformation and growth. It was a process that allowed each soul to understand its place in the grand tapestry of existence. The idea filled her with a sense of awe and responsibility. She realized that the choices she made each day were not just fleeting moments but threads that wove into the fabric of eternity. As the night deepened, Miriam sat in silence, contemplating her own threads. The book had become more than a source of stories. It was a mirror reflecting her own journey. And with each page she turned, the reflection grew clearer. Chapter 8. Love as the Universal Force. As Miriam delved into the next chapter, a sense of warmth enveloped her. The pages seemed to radiate an energy unlike anything she had felt before, as though the book itself was alive. The title of the chapter, Love as the Universal Force, hinted at the profound truths waiting to be uncovered. The text began with an account from a Renaissance poet who had died young but claimed to have glimpsed the afterlife. He described his transition as being submerged in a boundless ocean of light, where every wave carried the essence of love. It was not the love of man or woman, not a fleeting emotion, he wrote. It was the foundation of existence, the pulse of the universe itself. The poet's story was followed by others, each revealing how love manifested in the afterlife. A mother reunited with her child described an embrace that transcended physicality, where their souls intertwined in a union of pure understanding and connection. A soldier who had lived a life of violence recounted a moment of overwhelming forgiveness as he encountered the spirits of those he had wronged. "Their love did not condemn me," he said. "It freed me." Miriam read these accounts with a growing sense of wonder. The text portrayed love not as a mere sentiment but as the fabric of existence, binding all souls together across time and space. The book explained that love was the driving force behind creation, the energy that fueled every act of kindness, every moment of connection, and every instance of forgiveness. The chapter continued with a series of stories exploring how love had the power to transform even the most tormented souls. One particularly striking account came from a man who had lived a life of isolation, pushing away those who cared for him out of fear and mistrust. In the afterlife, he was surrounded by beings of light who emanated unconditional love. For the first time, he felt seen and understood. "It was as though they knew every shadow of my soul and loved me not in spite of it, but because of it," he wrote. Miriam was deeply moved by these narratives, but one story stood out above the rest. It was the tale of a woman who had dedicated her life to caring for others, often at the expense of her own well-being. When she entered the afterlife, she was greeted by a radiant figure who revealed itself to be a manifestation of the love she had given throughout her life. The figure embraced her, and in that moment, she realized that every act of selflessness, every sacrifice, had woven a thread in the vast tapestry of existence. "I was not just giving love," she wrote. "I was creating it." The text elaborated on this idea, explaining that love was not something external to be found or received. It was an intrinsic part of every soul, a force that could be cultivated and expanded. The more one gave, the more one became aligned with the universal rhythm of existence. Miriam couldn't help but reflect on her own life. Had she truly understood the depth of love in her relationships? Were there moments when she had withheld love out of fear or pride? The stories in the book seemed to whisper a challenge, to see love not as a vulnerability but as a strength, a force capable of healing even the deepest wounds. As she continued to read, Miriam came across a description of a phenomenon called the web of connection. The text described it as an intricate network of light that linked every soul in existence. Each thread represented a moment of love, whether it was a fleeting smile shared between strangers or a lifetime of devotion. The web was constantly expanding, growing brighter with every act of kindness and compassion. The final passage of the chapter was written by a spiritual teacher who had spent his life meditating on the nature of existence. In the afterlife, he had encountered the web in its entirety, a vast, pulsating tapestry that stretched across the cosmos. To love, he wrote, is to align with the very heartbeat of the universe. Miriam closed the book with a profound sense of gratitude. Love, as described in these pages, was not just an emotion but a universal truth, the force that gave life meaning and connected all beings. She resolved to carry this understanding with her, to let love guide her actions and illuminate her path. For the first time since she had begun her journey with the book, Miriam felt a lightness in her heart. The accounts she had read filled her with hope, not just for what awaited beyond the veil, but for the possibilities that lay within her own life. Love, she realized, was the answer she hadn't known she was searching for. Chapter 9. The Forgotten Dimensions. The next chapter of the book felt heavier, its pages seeming to vibrate with an unseen energy. Miriam hesitated for a moment before diving in, her curiosity outweighing her trepidation. This chapter was titled The Forgotten Dimensions, a phrase that filled her with equal parts intrigue and unease. What could these dimensions be? And why had they been forgotten? The chapter began with a description of realms that existed beyond the grasp of human perception, places unbound by the laws of time and space. These dimensions, the text explained, were not forgotten in the sense of being erased from memory, but rather, they existed in the periphery of awareness, accessible only to those willing to look beyond the material world. The first account was from a 12th century Persian mystic who had experienced what he described as a journey of the soul. During a deep meditative state, he found himself in a realm where colors, sounds, and emotions blended into a single, overwhelming sensation. He wrote of rivers that sang and mountains that radiated warmth, of a sky that shimmered with thoughts yet unspoken. It was a place where existence was not fragmented, he wrote, but whole, where every element was part of a greater unity. Miriam was captivated by this description. It reminded her of dreams she'd had as a child, vivid and surreal, where the impossible felt not only real but natural. She wondered if these dreams were echoes of these forgotten dimensions, fleeting glimpses of a reality just beyond her reach. The text continued with accounts from various individuals who had traversed these realms, each describing them in ways that defied conventional understanding. A 19th century physicist wrote of a dimension where time flowed not in a straight line but in spirals, where past, present, and future coexisted in a kaleidoscope of possibilities. He claimed to have seen events from his own life, not as memories or predictions, but as moments existing simultaneously. It was not time as we know it, he explained, but a dance of infinite potential. Another story came from a shaman of the Amazon rainforest who had entered a forgotten dimension through a ritual involving sacred plants. In this realm, she encountered beings of pure energy who communicated not with words but with patterns of light and sound. These beings shared knowledge with her, revealing the interconnectedness of all life. They showed me the threads that bind us, she wrote, the invisible web of existence that stretches across all worlds. Miriam read these accounts with a mixture of awe and disbelief. The idea that such dimensions existed, hidden in plain sight, was both exhilarating and unsettling. She found herself questioning the nature of reality. If these realms were real, what did that mean for her understanding of life, death, and everything in between? The chapter delved deeper into the purpose of these forgotten dimensions. According to the text, They were not merely places to visit, but spaces of profound learning and transformation. Souls who entered these realms were said to gain insights that transcended human comprehension, knowledge that could reshape their journeys in the physical and spiritual worlds. One particularly compelling narrative came from a monk in 16th century Japan. During a near-death experience, he found himself in a dimension where the boundaries between self and other dissolved. He described it as a state of being everything and nothing, where he could feel the thoughts and emotions of every soul in existence. This overwhelming sense of unity left an indelible mark on him, shaping the rest of his life. To know the forgotten dimensions, he wrote, is to know oneself as part of the infinite. Miriam closed the book briefly, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what she was reading. She thought about the barriers she had constructed in her own life, the way she had separated herself from others and from the world. The accounts in this chapter seemed to suggest that these barriers were illusions, that true understanding came from embracing the interconnectedness of all things. When she reopened the book, the narrative shifted to a warning. The forgotten dimensions, while transformative, were not without their dangers. Souls unprepared for their truths could become lost, unable to reconcile their experiences with their previous understanding of reality. The text recounted the story of an alchemist in Renaissance Europe who had entered a forgotten dimension through an experimental ritual. Though he returned with groundbreaking insights, he struggled to communicate them to others, his mind fractured by the experience. The dimensions are not kind or cruel, the text cautioned. They simply are. It is the seeker's responsibility to approach them with humility and purpose. Miriam found this caution sobering. It reminded her of the shopkeeper's words when she had first purchased the book. It's not merely a book. It's a mirror. She wondered if these forgotten dimensions were mirrors as well, reflecting not only the universe but the souls who entered them. The chapter concluded with a message of hope. While the forgotten dimensions were enigmatic and challenging, they were also spaces of boundless potential. They offered opportunities for growth, healing, and understanding that could not be found elsewhere. To remember the forgotten dimensions, the text read, is to remember our place in the vastness of existence. Miriam closed the book, her mind racing with questions. The forgotten dimensions felt like a puzzle she was only beginning to piece together, a mystery that beckoned her to explore further. She realized that her journey with the book was far from over. There were still more truths to uncover, more layers of reality to peel back. And as daunting as that prospect was, it filled her with a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in years. Chapter 10. The Path to Transcendence. Miriam turned the page and was greeted by the title of the next chapter, The Path to Transcendence. The weight of those words struck her immediately, evoking a mix of curiosity and trepidation. What did transcendence truly mean, and how could one achieve it? She settled deeper into her chair, ready to uncover the mysteries held within. The text began by defining transcendence not as an escape from existence but as a complete integration with it. Transcendence, it explained, was the state of rising beyond the illusions of separation, fear, and limitation to fully align with a universal rhythm. It was not a destination but an ongoing process, a journey that unfolded in layers. The first account came from a philosopher in ancient Greece who had devoted his life to understanding the nature of reality. In his final moments, he described a profound shift in perception. The world around me dissolved, he wrote, revealing an endless expanse of light and energy. I saw myself not as a single point but as part of an infinite field of existence. This realization, he explained, was not one of detachment but of connection. For the first time, he felt the unity of all things. Miriam paused, letting those words sink in. The idea of transcendence as connection rather than detachment was a revelation. She had always thought of it as rising above, leaving behind the struggles and imperfections of the world. But the book seemed to suggest otherwise, that true transcendence was found in embracing the whole, imperfections and all. The text continued with a story from a 19th century poet who had experienced transcendence during a near-death encounter. He described it as stepping into a realm where every atom pulsed with meaning, every sound resonated with purpose. I understood, he wrote, that the universe was a symphony, and I was both the musician and the audience. This realization filled him with an overwhelming sense of gratitude, a feeling he carried with him for the rest of his life. One of the most striking narratives in the chapter came from a healer in 15th century China. She described a moment of transcendence during meditation, where she became aware of her past lives and future possibilities. "I saw my soul as a river," she wrote, flowing through countless landscapes, each lifetime a bend or curve in its path. Transcendence was not about reaching the ocean but about understanding the journey. The book outlined several principles for achieving transcendence, weaving them through the narratives. The first was the principle of presence, being fully engaged in the moment. Transcendence required stepping out of the constant churn of thoughts and worries to experience life as it unfolded. A Zen master's account illustrated this beautifully. He spoke of finding transcendence not in grand revelations but in the simplicity of tending to his garden. "Each leaf, each stone," he wrote, "taught me more about the universe than any scripture ever could." The second principle was surrender, letting go of control and trusting the flow of life. A sailor's tale brought this concept to life. Lost at sea, he found himself in a realm beyond time, where he felt an overwhelming peace. "It was only when I stopped fighting the waves," he recounted, "that I discovered the current carrying me home." The final principle was compassion, extending love and understanding to oneself and others. A story from a teacher in Renaissance Italy illustrated this perfectly. After a lifetime of harsh self-judgment, he experienced a moment of transcendence where he saw himself through the eyes of the universe. "I realized," he wrote, "that every mistake, every flaw, was a brushstroke in the masterpiece of my soul." As Miriam read, she began to see patterns in her own life. Moments when she had felt inexplicably at peace, times when she had been moved by a simple act of kindness or the beauty of nature. Were these glimpses of transcendence? The book seemed to suggest that transcendence was not a far-off goal but something woven into the fabric of everyday life, waiting to be noticed. The chapter's closing account was perhaps the most profound. It came from a modern scientist who had spent years studying consciousness. In the afterlife, he described entering a dimension of pure potentiality, where thoughts became forms and intentions shaped reality. "It was the ultimate playground," he wrote, "where the only limit was the boundaries of my own belief." This dimension, he explained, was not separate from the physical world but interwoven with it. Transcendence was the realization that both realms were one and the same. The final passage of the chapter left Miriam with a sense of awe. "To transcend is not to escape but to embrace," it read. "It is to see the divine in the mundane, to find infinity in a single moment. It is the path of every soul, the ultimate journey of existence." Miriam closed the book, her mind swirling with thoughts. The path to transcendence was not a road she had to find. It was one she was already walking. Each step, each choice, was a part of that journey. And as she sat in the quiet of her room, she felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it fully. Chapter 11. The Memory of the Eternal. The title of the next chapter lingered in Miriam's mind like an echo. The Memory of the Eternal. As she began to read, she sensed that this chapter held an especially profound truth, one that tied the threads of the book's earlier revelations into a cohesive whole. This was a journey into the timeless realm of memory, not just individual memories, but the collective memory of existence itself. The text opened with a striking assertion. Every moment, every thought, every action is recorded in the memory of the eternal. It described this memory as a vast, pulsating archive that transcended time and space. Known in some traditions as the Akashic Records, it was said to hold the essence of all that has ever been and ever will be. Souls, the text explained, could access this memory to gain insight, understanding, and healing. The first account came from a scribe in ancient Mesopotamia who claimed to have glimpsed the eternal memory during a vision. He described it as a library of light, where every book radiated knowledge and energy. As he reached for a volume that seemed to call out to him, he was flooded with images and emotions from his past lives. "It was as though I was reliving every moment simultaneously," he wrote. "Each life was a thread, and together they wove a tapestry that told the story of my soul." Miriam found herself mesmerized by the imagery. A library of light, a tapestry of lives. These metaphors spoke to a truth she had always felt but could never articulate. She wondered what her own tapestry might look like. What stories would it tell? What lessons would it reveal? The chapter continued with narratives of individuals who had accessed the eternal memory during near-death experiences, meditative states, or moments of profound clarity. A 13th-century mystic wrote of standing in a field of stars, each one representing a soul. As he focused on a single star, it expanded into a cascade of memories, not just his own but those of countless others. "We are not separate beings," he wrote. "We are threads in a single, infinite story." Another account came from a modern-day scientist who had a near-death experience after a car accident. She described being enveloped in a golden light and hearing a symphony of voices, each one recounting a piece of her life. But these were not voices of judgment. They were voices of understanding and compassion. "They showed me the beauty of my struggles," she wrote, "and the strength I had gained from my pain." The text explained that accessing the memory of the eternal was not about reliving the past but about gaining perspective. It allowed souls to see their lives in context, to understand the interconnectedness of their choices and experiences. This understanding, in turn, facilitated growth and healing. Miriam was particularly moved by a story from a healer in 17th-century Africa. During a trance, she had entered the eternal memory and encountered the souls of her ancestors. They shared their wisdom, guiding her through challenges she had faced in her life. "Their voices were like the wind," she wrote, "gentle yet powerful, carrying the weight of generations." This experience not only deepened her connection to her heritage but also gave her the strength to continue her work as a healer. As Miriam read on, she began to see the eternal memory not just as a repository of the past, but as a source of infinite potential. The text described it as a wellspring of creativity and inspiration, a place where souls could access the wisdom of the ages to shape their futures. One account told of an artist who had entered the eternal memory and emerged with visions that transformed his work, allowing him to create pieces that touched the hearts of all who saw them. The chapter also addressed the challenges of accessing the eternal memory. It cautioned that souls must approach it with humility and readiness, as the revelations it offered could be overwhelming. A story from a monk in Tibet illustrated this point. During meditation, he had glimpsed the eternal memory but struggled to reconcile its vastness with his limited human perspective. "It was like trying to hold the ocean in a cup," he wrote. Over time, he learned to approach the memory in smaller increments, allowing its truths to unfold gradually. The chapter concluded with a reflection on the purpose of the eternal memory. "It is not merely a record," the text read, "but a living guide. It shows us not only where we have been but where we can go. It reminds us that every moment, no matter how small, is part of a greater whole." Miriam closed the book, her mind brimming with questions and insights. The memory of the eternal felt both vast and intimate, a reminder of the infinite connections that shaped her existence. She realized that her journey with the book was not just about understanding the afterlife but about embracing the fullness of life itself. As she sat in the quiet of her room, Miriam felt a profound sense of gratitude. The stories she had read, the truths she had uncovered, were gifts she would carry with her forever. And though her journey was far from over, she knew she was not walking it alone. The memory of the eternal was with her, guiding her every step of the way. Chapter 12. The Veil Between Worlds. The next chapter title, The Veil Between Worlds, sent a shiver down Miriam's spine. The concept of a veil separating the physical and spiritual realms was one she had heard before, but she sensed that this chapter would delve deeper than any folklore or philosophy she'd previously encountered. With a steadying breath, she turned the page. The chapter began by describing the veil not as a physical barrier but as a perceptual one. The veil, the text explained, is not something that divides. It is something that filters. It allows the physical world to exist in focus while keeping the infinite just out of reach. The purpose of the veil, it continued, was not to separate but to protect. It ensured that souls could fully immerse themselves in the experience of life without being overwhelmed by the vastness of existence. The first account came from an 18th-century scholar who had spent his life studying the metaphysical. On his deathbed, he described a moment when the veil began to thin. "It was as though a fog was lifting," he wrote. "I could see the threads of light connecting everything. The world I had known was but a shadow of the greater reality." Miriam paused to absorb his words. She imagined what it must have felt like to glimpse the threads of light, to see the connections that were always there but hidden from view. It was a humbling thought, the idea that the world she knew was just one layer of a much larger tapestry. The chapter continued with narratives of individuals who had experienced moments when the veil had momentarily lifted. A musician from the Romantic era recounted a performance where he felt an otherworldly presence. "It was as though the music was not coming from me but through me," he wrote. "I could feel the presence of something vast and eternal, guiding my hands and filling the room with light." Another story came from a woman in 20th century Appalachia who had a near-death experience after a car accident. She described floating above her body and seeing both the physical world and a realm of pure energy. "The veil was like a shimmering curtain," she explained. "I could see through it, but I couldn't cross it. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once." Miriam felt a deep resonance with these stories. She thought about moments in her own life when she had felt something unexplainable, a sense of being watched over, a sudden clarity that felt like it came from beyond herself. Were those glimpses through the veil? And if so, what might she see if it were to lift completely? The text explained that the veil was not uniform. It varied in thickness depending on circumstances. Certain places, times, and even people were said to have a thinner veil, making it easier to sense the spiritual realm. Ancient temples, twilight hours, and moments of profound emotion were all described as times when the veil grew thinner. In these moments, the text read, "The infinite whispers to the finite," reminding it of its source. One particularly moving account came from a child in 15th century Japan who had vivid dreams of the afterlife. She described seeing loved ones who had passed, standing just beyond a translucent curtain. "They were so close," she wrote, "yet I knew I couldn't reach them. Their smiles told me I didn't need to." The simplicity and purity of her words struck Miriam deeply. She imagined the comfort of seeing loved ones again, even if only through a veil. The chapter also addressed the role of the veil in spiritual growth. It suggested that the veil was not a hindrance but a tool. By limiting perception, it allowed souls to focus on the lessons and experiences of the physical world. The text compared it to a lens, sharpening the details of one layer of reality while blurring the others. "The veil is not an obstacle," it explained. "It is a guide." Miriam found this perspective both challenging and enlightening. She had always thought of the veil as something to be overcome, a barrier to be breached. But the book suggested that its presence was intentional and even necessary. It was not about escaping the veil but understanding its purpose. The final narrative in the chapter came from a mystic in the early 1900s who had dedicated his life to exploring the boundaries of perception. In his writings, he described moments when the veil would shift, revealing glimpses of the eternal. "It was never something I could control," he admitted. "But when it happened, it was as though the universe itself was breathing with me, showing me its heart." The chapter concluded with a profound reflection. The veil between worlds is not a wall to climb but a mirror to see through. It shows us both what we are and what we are becoming. To honor the veil is to honor the journey of existence. As Miriam closed the book, she felt a sense of clarity she hadn't known before. The veil was not something to be feared or resented but something to be embraced. It was a reminder that the physical and spiritual were not separate but intertwined, each enriching the other. For the rest of the evening, Miriam sat quietly, her mind filled with images of shimmering curtains, threads of light, and the infinite whispers that lay just beyond her perception. The veil had always been there, and now, for the first time, she felt grateful for it. Chapter 13. The Interwoven Destinies. Miriam felt a sense of profound anticipation as she turned the page to the next chapter. The title, The Interwoven Destinies, immediately drew her in. She had often thought of life as a series of isolated events, but the book promised a new perspective, one where every choice and every connection formed part of a grander, interconnected design. The chapter began with a vivid metaphor. Life is not a single thread, but a tapestry, each thread crossing and intertwining with countless others. Together, they form the intricate pattern of existence. This idea resonated deeply with Miriam. She imagined her own life as a thread, winding and twisting, intersecting with others in ways she hadn't fully understood. The first narrative came from a 17th century merchant who had narrowly escaped death during a shipwreck. He described a moment of clarity as he floated on a piece of debris, staring at the vast expanse of the sea. "I realized," he wrote, that my survival was not an isolated event but part of a chain of choices and actions made by countless others, the shipbuilders, the sailors, even the winds that guided us. This realization led him to dedicate the remainder of his life to acts of service, believing that every action he took would ripple outward, affecting countless others. The text continued with an account from a 19th-century composer who claimed that his greatest symphony was not his own creation, but the result of the inspiration he had drawn from those around him. Each note, he explained, was a reflection of a conversation, a glance, a shared moment. My music is not mine alone. It belongs to everyone who has touched my life. Miriam was struck by the humility in these stories. They suggested that individual achievements were never truly individual but were shaped by the invisible threads of connection. She thought about her own life and the people who had influenced her, often without even realizing it. The teacher who had encouraged her curiosity, the friend who had supported her during a difficult time, they were all part of her tapestry. The chapter delved deeper into the mechanics of interwoven destinies, describing how even the smallest actions could have far-reaching consequences. A story from a farmer in 14th-century France illustrated this beautifully. One day, he had shared his meager harvest with a traveler passing through his village. That traveler, unknown to him, went on to become a healer, saving countless lives during a plague. My single act of kindness, the farmer wrote, was a seed that grew into a forest of blessings. Miriam paused to consider the implications of this story. How many seeds had she unknowingly planted? How many acts of kindness, however small, had rippled outward to touch lives she would never know? The thought filled her with a sense of both responsibility and wonder. The book explained that the interconnectedness of destinies was not limited to positive actions. It recounted the story of a warrior in ancient China whose choices during a time of conflict had led to unintended suffering. In the afterlife, he was shown the ripple effects of his actions, not as a form of punishment but as a lesson. Each choice, the text read, is a thread. Some threads strengthen the tapestry, while others fray it. But all are necessary to the greater design. This balanced perspective intrigued Miriam. The book was not advocating for perfection but for awareness. It suggested that every action, whether intentional or not, contributed to the collective experience of existence. The chapter's final narrative came from a mystic in 16th-century Persia who described a vision of the tapestry of life. She wrote of seeing threads of light stretching across the universe, each one pulsating with energy. Where threads crossed, they formed nodes of intense brightness, representing moments of connection and shared purpose. The tapestry is infinite, she wrote, but every thread matters. Every intersection is sacred. As Miriam closed the chapter, she felt a profound sense of unity. The interwoven destinies was more than a concept. It was a truth that permeated every aspect of existence. She realized that her life was not just her own. It was part of something far greater, a tapestry woven from countless threads of love, choice, and connection. For the first time, she saw her struggles and triumphs in a new light. They were not isolated events but part of a pattern, one that was still unfolding. And as she sat in the quiet of her room, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the threads that had shaped her journey and the ones she had yet to weave. Chapter 14. The Cosmic Threads. As Miriam turned the page, the title, The Cosmic Threads, greeted her with an air of mystery and grandeur. The book seemed to delve deeper into the idea of interconnectedness, suggesting that every soul, every life, and every event was linked by an invisible web stretching across the universe. Miriam leaned forward, eager to unravel this intricate concept. The chapter opened with a striking analogy. The cosmos is a loom, and each soul is a thread. Together, they weave the fabric of existence, creating patterns that transcend time and space. This imagery captivated Miriam. She had always considered her life to be a solitary journey, but the book suggested otherwise. Her thread was part of a grander design, intertwined with countless others. The first story in the chapter came from a 9th-century astronomer who had spent his life mapping the stars. On his deathbed, he described a vision of the cosmos not as an expanse of isolated celestial bodies but as a living tapestry. Every star, he wrote, was connected by luminous strands of energy, forming constellations that told the story of existence. He believed that these threads represented the connections between souls, each one contributing to the balance and harmony of the universe. Miriam felt a chill as she read his words. She imagined the night sky, each star a beacon of life and connection. The thought was both humbling and exhilarating. She began to wonder about the threads in her own life, the people she had met, the choices she had made, and the ways they might be connected to a larger cosmic design. The text continued with accounts of individuals who had glimpsed the cosmic threads during moments of heightened awareness. A poet in 16th century Italy described a dream in which he saw golden threads stretching across the heavens, each one vibrating with a unique melody. The threads were alive, he wrote. They sang of love, loss, and the infinite possibilities of existence. His dream inspired him to compose a series of sonnets that he believed were guided by the music of the threads. Another account came from a scientist in the early 20th century who experienced a near-death event during an experiment. He described finding himself in a dimension where the cosmic threads were visible, pulsating with light and energy. Each thread was a life, he wrote, and where they intersected, there was a burst of creation, an idea, a relationship, a new beginning. Miriam was fascinated by the idea that intersections of threads represented moments of creation. She thought about the pivotal moments in her own life, the chance encounters and unexpected opportunities that had shaped her journey. Were those moments intersections of cosmic threads? And if so, what patterns were they creating? The book delved deeper into the significance of these threads, explaining that they were not static but dynamic, constantly shifting and evolving. Each choice a soul made sent ripples through the threads, affecting not only their own life but the lives of others. The threads are a reminder, the text read, that no soul is ever truly alone. Every action, every thought, resonates across the cosmos. One particularly moving narrative came from a healer in ancient Egypt who described her ability to sense the threads of others. She wrote of seeing them as strands of light extending from each person, connecting them to their ancestors, their descendants, and the world around them. When I heal, she explained, I am not just mending a body. I am relining the threads, restoring harmony to the tapestry. The chapter also addressed the darker aspects of the threads, acknowledging that not all connections were harmonious. A warrior from medieval Japan recounted a vision in which he saw threads tangled and frayed, representing the conflicts and pain he had caused. Yet, even in their disarray, the threads were not broken. The cosmos allows for repair, the text assured. Through understanding and forgiveness, even the most damaged threads can be rewoven into the fabric of existence. Miriam found this idea both comforting and empowering. It suggested that no matter how far one strayed or how much harm was done, there was always a path back to balance and connection. The cosmic threads were resilient, capable of withstanding the trials of existence. The chapter concluded with a powerful reflection. To see the cosmic threads is to see the unity of all things. Each thread matters, not for its individual strength but for the role it plays in the greater tapestry. Together, they create the masterpiece of existence. As Miriam closed the book, she felt a profound sense of belonging. Her life was not a solitary thread but part of a vast, interconnected web. She resolved to honor the threads in her own life, to nurture the connections that brought light and to mend those that had frayed. For the first time, she saw herself not as an isolated being but as a vital part of the cosmic loom, contributing to the beauty and balance of existence. Chapter 15, The Resonance of the Soul. As Miriam opened the next chapter, the title, The Resonance of the Soul, seemed to hum with significance. She couldn't help but feel that this chapter would reveal something deeply personal, something that would resonate within her own being. The text began by explaining that every soul vibrates with a unique frequency, a resonance that reflects its essence. This resonance, the book elaborated, is not static but evolves with experiences, choices, and growth. The soul's resonance is its song, the text read. It is the melody that harmonizes with the universe, shaping and being shaped by the symphony of existence. The first account was from an ancient Sufi mystic who described hearing the resonance of his soul during meditation. It was not a sound but a feeling, he wrote, a vibration that pulsed through me, connecting me to everything. In that moment, I understood that my soul was both an individual note and part of a greater harmony. This experience led him to a life of devotion, seeking to align his actions with the resonance he had felt. Miriam found herself deeply moved by this idea. She wondered what her own resonance might sound like, what melody her soul added to the universal symphony. She thought about the moments in her life when she had felt most aligned, most at peace. Were those moments when her resonance was most in tune? The text continued with stories of individuals who had discovered their soul's resonance in various ways. A painter from the Renaissance described a moment of creative ecstasy when he felt his brush guided by an unseen force. It was as though the canvas was singing, he wrote, and I was merely the instrument through which the song was expressed. Another account came from a tribal elder in Africa who spoke of a ritual dance that brought her into harmony with her ancestors. During the dance, she felt a deep vibration within her chest, a resonance that seemed to bridge the past and present. It was not just my soul that sang, she explained, but the souls of all who came before me. Miriam marveled at the universality of these experiences. Across cultures and centuries, people had found ways to connect with their soul's resonance. The text suggested that this connection was not a rare gift but a natural part of existence, accessible to anyone willing to listen. The chapter then turned to the practical implications of resonance. It explained that when a soul's resonance was in harmony, it radiated peace, love, and vitality. Conversely, when it was out of tune, it could lead to feelings of discord, imbalance, and even illness. To heal, the text read, one must first rediscover the soul's true resonance. A particularly poignant story illustrated this point. A healer in 12th century Tibet recounted a time when she had lost her way, overwhelmed by the suffering she witnessed. During a solitary retreat in the mountains, she heard the resonance of her soul for the first time in years. It was faint at first, she wrote, a distant echo. But as I sat in stillness, it grew stronger, reminding me of who I was and why I was here. This reconnect ion not only restored her vitality but also deepened her ability to help others. The book also touched on the collective resonance of groups, families, and communities. It described how shared values, intentions, and emotions could create a collective harmony or disharmony. A tale from a village in medieval Europe told of a festival where the entire community gathered to sing. The villagers believed that their voices, united in song, could align their collective resonance with the rhythms of the earth. The harvest that followed, the text noted, was the most abundant they had ever known. Miriam was struck by the power of collective resonance. She thought about the people in her life, the relationships that lifted her up and those that seemed to drain her. Were these dynamics reflections of resonance, some in harmony, others in discord? The idea offered a new perspective on how she might navigate her connections. The chapter concluded with a meditation exercise designed to help the reader attune to their soul's resonance. Sit in stillness, it instructed, and listen not with your ears but with your heart. Feel the vibration within you, the unique frequency that is yours alone. Let it guide you, let it heal you, let it remind you of your place in the universal song. Miriam closed the book and sat quietly for a moment, reflecting on what she had read. The resonance of the soul was not just a concept but an invitation to listen, to align, and to contribute her unique melody to the symphony of existence. For the first time, she felt a deep sense of connection not only to the universe but also to herself. And as she sat in the silence of her room, she thought she could almost hear it, the faint, beautiful hum of her soul. Chapter 16. Reflection in Eternity. Miriam's fingers lingered on the edges of the page as she turned to the next chapter. Reflection in Eternity, the title read. The weight of the words resonated within her, promising a journey into the most profound depths of the soul's existence. She felt as though the book was asking her to pause and truly consider not only what she had learned but how it had reshaped her. The chapter opened with a statement that felt like a truth she had always known but never articulated. Eternity is not a span of time but a state of being, where every moment exists simultaneously. In eternity, reflection is the mirror that reveals the fullness of the soul's journey. The text began with an account from a 10th century philosopher who described his near-death experience as stepping into a vast hall of mirrors. Each mirror reflected a different aspect of his life, the choices he had made, the relationships he had formed, and the emotions he had carried. It was not a judgment, he wrote, but an unveiling. I saw not what I had done wrong, but what I had created. Miriam imagined herself in such a hall. What would her mirrors reveal? She thought about the paths she had taken, the people she had loved, and the moments she had avoided out of fear. The thought both intrigued and unsettled her. The next story came from a healer in ancient Egypt who described the act of reflection as the soul's ultimate tool for transformation. She wrote of rituals where individuals would enter sacred spaces designed to help them access their eternal reflections. It was not the past we sought to change, she explained, but the understanding of how the past shaped the present and how the present could reshape the future. Miriam lingered on these words, struck by the idea that reflection was not about dwelling on what had been but about finding clarity and purpose. She thought about her own life and the moments she had revisited in her mind, not to regret but to understand. The chapter described a process called eternal reflection, a practice where souls would enter a state of profound stillness to view their lives from the perspective of eternity. This practice, the text explained, allowed souls to see the ripple effects of their actions, both the light they had brought into the world and the shadows they had cast. Reflection is not an end, the text read. It is a beginning, a doorway to transformation. One account told of a warrior in medieval Japan who, in the afterlife, encountered the souls of those he had fought against. Through the process of reflection, he saw not enemies but kindred spirits, each playing a role in the greater tapestry of existence. We were not adversaries, he wrote. We were teachers for one another, guiding each other toward understanding and growth. Miriam felt a deep resonance with this story. She thought about the conflicts in her own life, the people she had clashed with. Were they, too, teachers she had failed to recognize? The idea filled her with a sense of possibility, as though even the most painful memories held seeds of wisdom waiting to be uncovered. The text continued with a story from a 19th-century scientist who had dedicated his life to the study of light. In the afterlife, he described encountering what he called the reflected spectrum, a radiant field where every color represented an aspect of his life. The brilliance of the spectrum was determined not by his achievements but by the authenticity with which he had lived. The brightest hues, he wrote, were not those of success but of love, courage, and kindness. This account left Miriam with tears in her eyes. She realized that the measure of a life was not in its milestones but in its moments of truth. She wondered about the colors of her own spectrum, about the authenticity she had brought to her relationships and her choices. The chapter ended with a profound reflection. In eternity, reflection is the soul's greatest gift. It reveals not what we were, but who we are becoming. Through reflection, the soul learns to embrace its light and its shadow, to weave them into the harmony of existence. Miriam closed the book and sat quietly, her thoughts a tapestry of memories and insights. She felt a profound sense of gratitude for the journey she had undertaken, not just through the pages of the book but through her own life. The process of reflection, she realized, was not a task to be completed but a practice to be lived. For the first time, she felt at peace with her past, not because it was perfect but because it was hers. And in that peace, she found the courage to look forward, ready to continue weaving her thread into the eternal tapestry of existence. Chapter 17. The Unity of All Things. The title of the next chapter, The Unity of All Things, glimmered with promise as Miriam turned the page. She felt as though she were on the cusp of understanding something fundamental, a truth that transcended the boundaries of language and thought. The previous chapters had explored the threads that connected souls, the resonance of the individual, and the reflections of eternity. But this chapter seemed poised to tie it all together. The text began with a bold declaration. The essence of existence is unity. Every atom, every soul, every thought and action are threads in the infinite tapestry of being. To see the unity is to glimpse the divine. Miriam lingered on these words, feeling the gravity of their simplicity. She had always thought of life in fragments, divided by time, space, and perspective. Yet the book suggested a singular truth. Everything was one. The first narrative came from a 15th-century monk who had experienced a profound vision during meditation. He described being enveloped by a light so radiant that it dissolved the boundaries of his physical form. I was no longer a single being, he wrote. I was the river, the mountain, the sky. I was every life that had ever been and would ever be. I was not separate. I was whole. This experience reshaped his life, inspiring him to dedicate himself to acts of compassion and service. Miriam's mind raced as she considered the implications of his vision. What would it mean to live as though unity were not a concept but a reality? She thought about her own relationships, the berries she had erected out of fear or misunderstanding. The idea that those berries were illusions felt both liberating and daunting. The chapter continued with accounts of unity manifesting in moments of crisis and connection. A doctor from the early 20th century recounted a harrowing experience during an earthquake. Trapped beneath rubble, he felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of connection to everyone around him, not just the living but also those who had passed and those yet to come. It was as though the boundaries of time and space had dissolved, he wrote. We were not many, we were one. This realization gave him the strength to survive and to dedicate his life to healing others. Another story came from an artist in 18th century France who described losing herself in her work. In those moments, she wrote, it was as though the brush moved of its own accord, guided by a force greater than myself. The painting was not mine. It was ours, mine, the universe's, and every soul that had ever inspired me. These accounts illustrated that unity was not an abstract idea but a lived experience, one that could be glimpsed in moments of creativity, connection, and crisis. The book explained that such experiences were reminders of the soul's true nature. To live in unity, it read, is to live in alignment with the universe itself. Miriam found herself reflecting on her own glimpses of unity. She thought about the time she had held a stranger's hand during a moment of shared grief, or the feeling of losing herself in the beauty of a sunset. These moments, fleeting as they were, felt like windows into a greater reality. The chapter delved into the challenges of embracing unity in a fragmented world. It recounted the story of a warrior in ancient Greece who had spent his life fighting for his city-state. In the afterlife, he was shown the souls of those he had called enemies. They were not my adversaries, he wrote. They were my brothers and sisters, playing their roles in a dance far greater than I had understood. This revelation filled him with both sorrow and joy, as he realized the futility of his divisions and the beauty of their shared existence. The text emphasized that unity did not mean uniformity. It celebrated the diversity of existence, explaining that each soul, each life, and each choice added depth and color to the tapestry of being. Unity is not the absence of difference, the book read. It is the harmony of differences, the symphony of countless notes creating a single, magnificent song. Miriam was deeply moved by this idea. She thought about the conflict she had witnessed and the pain they had caused. The book's words suggested a path forward, one that embraced differences not as barriers but as opportunities for connection and growth. The final narrative in the chapter came from a scientist in the 22nd century who had studied quantum entanglement. In his later years, he experienced a vision in which he saw the universe as a vast network of light, each point connected to every other. The universe is not a machine, he wrote. It is a living organism, a single, breathing entity of which we are all a part. The chapter concluded with a powerful reflection. Unity is the truth that underlies all truths. It is the essence of existence, the heartbeat of the cosmos. To see it is to remember who you are. Miriam closed the book, her heart brimming with a sense of wonder and possibility. The unity of all things was not just an idea. It was a reality she could choose to live. She resolved to carry this understanding with her, to let it guide her actions and her relationships. For the first time, she felt a profound sense of belonging, not just to her life, but to all of existence. Chapter 18. The Bridge Between Realms. Miriam turned the page to find herself staring at the title, The Bridge Between Realms. The words resonated deeply, as though inviting her to walk a path that connected the physical and the spiritual. She felt an anticipatory thrill, sensing that this chapter would delve into the mysterious intersections of the seen and unseen. The chapter began with a striking assertion. The bridge between realms is not a place but an experience, a moment where the boundaries of the physical dissolve to reveal the infinite. The book explained that these bridges were unique to each soul, often appearing during profound moments of insight, connection, or crisis. The first story came from an ancient shaman in the Amazon rainforest. He described a sacred ceremony involving a ritual drink that allowed participants to perceive the bridge between realms. It was as though the forest itself came alive, he wrote. Every tree, every creature shimmered with a light that was not of this world, and I could feel the heartbeat of the earth within me. Through this experience, he gained wisdom and guidance, which he used to heal and guide his community. Miriam found herself mesmerized by the imagery. She thought about the moments in her own life that had felt like glimpses of something greater. The quiet stillness of a forest, the overwhelming beauty of a sunrise. Were these her own bridges, fleeting yet profound? The text continued with accounts from various cultures and eras, each describing unique ways individuals had accessed the bridge. A 13th-century monk in Tibet wrote of a meditative state in which he felt his soul rise above his body, traveling through layers of light and energy. He described meeting luminous beings who communicated not with words but with feelings and visions. They showed me the interconnectedness of all things, he wrote, and I returned to my body with a peace that transcended understanding. Another story came from a musician in 18th-century Europe who described losing herself in her art. During a particularly emotional performance, she felt as though she had stepped onto a bridge between the earthly and the divine. The music was no longer mine, she wrote. It was a voice from beyond, using me as its instrument. Her compositions thereafter were hailed as transformative, filled with a depth that seemed almost otherworldly. Miriam paused, reflecting on how creativity and emotion could serve as portals to these bridges. She thought about the moments when she had felt inspired, as though ideas were flowing through her rather than from her. The book seemed to confirm that these experiences were more than imagination. They were glimpses into the greater realm. The chapter delved into the role of intention in accessing the bridge. It explained that while some bridges appeared spontaneously, others could be sought through practices like meditation, prayer, or rituals. The bridge is not built, the text read, it is revealed. To see it, one must approach with humility and an open heart. One story illustrated this beautifully. A sailor lost at sea in the 16th century recounted a moment of surrender when he had given up all hope of survival. In that moment, he felt an overwhelming sense of peace and saw a vision of his loved ones waiting for him on the other side. The vision did not save me, he wrote, but it gave me the strength to save myself. He was eventually rescued and spent the rest of his life helping others find hope in their darkest moments. Miriam was struck by the balance between surrender and action in this story. The bridge was not a place to linger but a source of strength and insight, a reminder of the infinite within the finite. The text also explored the dangers of crossing the bridge unprepared. It recounted the tale of an alchemist in Renaissance Italy who had attempted to access the spiritual realm through forbidden experiments. Though he succeeded in glimpsing the bridge, he returned with fragmented memories and a mind unable to reconcile what he had seen. The bridge is not for conquest, the text warned. It is for communion. The chapter concluded with a meditation exercise designed to help the readers sense their own bridge. Sit in stillness, it instructed, and focus on the space between breaths, the pause between thoughts. It is in these liminal spaces that the bridge may appear. Miriam closed the book, her thoughts swirling with possibilities. The bridge between realms was not something distant or unattainable. It was a presence she could sense, a path she could walk. She resolved to approach her life with greater openness and intention, ready to step onto the bridge whenever it appeared. For the first time, she felt a profound connection not only to her own experiences but to the infinite beyond them. The bridge was there, waiting, and she was ready to cross. Chapter 19. The Transformation of the Soul. Miriam approached the next chapter with a mixture of anticipation and reverence. The Transformation of the Soul, the title read, promising a deeper exploration into the process of spiritual evolution. As she turned the page, she felt as though she was stepping into a sacred space, one where the mysteries of growth and change would be unveiled. The chapter began with an evocative statement. Transformation is not a single event but an ongoing journey. It is the shedding of illusions, the embrace of truth, and the alignment of the soul with its highest potential. These words resonated with Miriam, who had often felt that her life was a series of beginnings, endings, and rebirths. The first account was from an ancient sculptor who described his creative process as a metaphor for transformation. He spoke of chiseling away at a block of marble, revealing the form hidden within. The sculpture was always there, he wrote. My task was not to create it but to free it from what did not belong. This insight mirrored the soul's journey, where growth often required letting go of the unnecessary to reveal the essential. Miriam imagined her own soul as a sculpture in progress. What parts of herself had she hidden beneath layers of fear, doubt, or societal expectation? What would she discover if she dared to chisel away? The text continued with stories of transformation from various walks of life. A warrior in ancient Persia recounted a moment of profound change on the battlefield. As he faced an overwhelming enemy, he experienced a sudden clarity, a vision of the futility of violence and the interconnectedness of all beings. He laid down his weapon and became a peacemaker, dedicating his life to healing the wounds of war. "My soul transformed," he wrote, "not because I gained something new, but because I remembered what I had always been." Another account came from a 19th-century poet who experienced a transformation through grief. After losing her child, she felt shattered, her world devoid of meaning. But as she mourned, she began to write, pouring her pain into words that resonated with others. "In sharing my sorrow," she wrote, "I found a deeper strength, a connection to the universal pulse of life." Her poetry became a beacon of hope for those who had faced similar losses. Miriam was struck by the common thread in these stories. Transformation was not about external change but about uncovering deeper truths. It was a process of remembering, realigning, and reconnecting with the essence of existence. The book delved into the stages of transformation, describing them as cycles of breakdown and breakthrough. It explained that transformation often began with a period of disintegration, where old patterns and beliefs were challenged or dismantled. This was followed by a phase of integration, where new insights and perspectives took root. Finally, there was emergence, where the soul stepped into a fuller expression of itself. A story from a healer in medieval India illustrated these stages beautifully. After losing her sight, she initially felt despair, believing her purpose had been taken from her. But in the quiet darkness, she discovered a new way of perceiving the world, sensing energy and emotions with unparalleled clarity. Her transformation allowed her to become a more intuitive and compassionate healer, reaching depths of understanding she had never imagined. The chapter also explored the role of challenges in transformation. It suggested that difficulties were not obstacles but catalysts, designed to push the soul toward growth. A sailor in 18th-century England described a storm at sea that nearly claimed his life. "The storm did not break me," he wrote. "It broke open the walls I had built around my heart, allowing me to feel life's full force and beauty." Miriam reflected on the storms in her own life. Had she seen them as opportunities for growth, or had she resisted their lessons? The book's words encouraged her to view her struggles with a new perspective, as integral parts of her transformation. The final narrative came from a mystic in 20th-century Africa who described transformation as a dance. "It is not a straight path," she wrote. "It is a rhythm, a flow, a surrender to the music of existence. Each step, each stumble, is part of the dance." This poetic vision left Miriam with a sense of hope and possibility. Transformation was not something to fear but something to embrace, a dance she could learn to enjoy. The chapter concluded with a reflection. The transformation of the soul is the ultimate journey, one that continues across lifetimes and dimensions. It is the process of becoming who you already are, of aligning with the eternal truth of your being. To transform is to live fully, deeply, and authentically. Miriam closed the book, her heart full of inspiration. The transformation of the soul was not an abstract idea. It was a lived experience, one she could choose to embrace each day. She resolved to approach her life with greater openness, courage, and curiosity, ready to shed what no longer served her and step into her highest potential. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she felt ready to dance. Chapter 20. The Awakening. Miriam felt a surge of anticipation as she turned to the final chapter, titled The Awakening. The word itself carried a promise of clarity, enlightenment, and a deeper understanding of all she had absorbed thus far. As the room around her faded into stillness, she began to read. The text opened with a profound statement. Awakening is not an event, it is a realization. It is the moment when the soul remembers its true nature and its place within the infinite tapestry of existence. Miriam paused to let the words sink in. This chapter was not about an end but a beginning, an invitation to step fully into awareness. The first narrative came from a philosopher in ancient Greece who described his awakening as a moment of sudden, overwhelming clarity. Sitting under a tree, contemplating the nature of the universe, he was struck by a vision of light and interconnectedness. "I saw the threads that bound all things," he wrote. "In that instant, I understood that separation is an illusion. We are all one, each of us a reflection of the eternal." Miriam felt a pang of recognition. She, too, had glimpsed moments of unity in her life, fleeting but unforgettable. The philosopher's words encouraged her to trust those experiences, to see them not as anomalies but as glimpses of a greater truth. The chapter continued with accounts of awakenings from individuals across cultures and eras. A mystic in medieval Persia recounted a dream in which she stood before a vast mirror. In the reflection, she saw not only herself but every soul she had ever encountered, their faces merging and blending into a single, radiant form. "The mirror showed me that we are not separate beings," she wrote. "We are facets of the same diamond, each reflecting the light in our own way." Another story came from a modern scientist who had dedicated his life to studying consciousness. During a near-death experience, he found himself in a realm of pure energy and awareness. "There was no time, no space," he wrote. "Only being. I was not observing the universe. I was the universe, alive and aware." This experience transformed his approach to science, inspiring him to explore the intersections of spirituality and physics. Miriam marveled at the diversity of these awakenings. Each was unique, yet they all pointed to the same underlying truth, the interconnectedness of existence and the boundless potential of the soul. She wondered what her own awakening might look like, or if it had already begun. The text elaborated on the nature of awakening, describing it as both a gift and a responsibility. "To awaken is to see clearly," it read, "and with clarity comes the call to live in alignment with truth, to act with love, and to create with purpose." The book explained that awakening was not the end of the journey but the beginning of a new one, a path of conscious co-creation with the universe. One particularly moving account came from a healer in 18th-century Africa who described awakening as a process of remembering. Through rituals and meditative practices, she reconnected with the wisdom of her ancestors and the rhythm of the natural world. "Awakening was not something I achieved," she wrote. "It was something I allowed, a peeling away of layers to reveal what had always been within me." Miriam found this perspective deeply comforting. Awakening was not about striving or effort. It was about surrender and openness. She thought about the moments in her life when she had felt most aligned, most at peace. Perhaps those were her own moments of awakening, quiet and unassuming yet profoundly transformative. The chapter also addressed the challenges of awakening. It acknowledged that clarity often brought discomfort, as it required confronting illusions and letting go of attachments. A warrior in ancient Japan described his awakening as both beautiful and painful. "I saw the truth of my actions," he wrote. "The harm I had caused, the love I had withheld. But in seeing, I found the strength to change, to become the man I was meant to be." Miriam felt a pang of recognition. Awakening was not always easy, but it was necessary. It was a process of growth, of stepping into the fullness of one's being, even when it was uncomfortable. The final narrative in the chapter came from a poet in 19th-century England who described awakening as a moment of profound gratitude. Sitting by a quiet stream, she felt a sudden rush of love for everything around her: the water, the trees, the sky, and even her own imperfections. "In that moment," she wrote, "I understood that life itself is the gift, and to live it fully is the only purpose." The chapter concluded with a meditation exercise. Close your eyes and breathe deeply. With each breath, let go of what is not you, the doubts, the fears, the illusions. With each exhale, allow your true self to emerge. Feel the light within you, the connection to all that is. This is awakening. This is your truth. As Miriam closed the book, she felt a quiet transformation within her. The awakening was not a distant goal but a present reality, a state of being she could step into at any moment. She resolved to carry this understanding with her, to live with greater awareness, gratitude, and love. The room around her seemed to shimmer with a newfound vibrancy, as though the veil between worlds had grown thinner. Miriam smiled, feeling a deep sense of peace. The journey of the book had brought her not to an end, but to a beginning. The beginning of a life lived fully awake.